The silver blade felt cold and right in my hand. Owen's blood, a shocking crimson against the pristine snow of the moonfall clearing, dripped from the edge. He stared up at me, his alpha power flickering like a dying star in his wide, disbelieving eyes. Around us, the pack was a frozen tableau of horror. I could feel the life inside me, our triplets, stirring, a fierce, protective pulse that mirrored Jackson's triumphant snarl from the sidelines was a distant buzz. All I saw was the man who threw me away. All I heard was the echo of his decree. My voice, when it finally came, was a stranger's, low, shattered, and laced with a poison I never knew I carried. You told me I was nothing. I raised the blade again. His breath hitched, but I'm getting ahead of myself. It didn't start with blood. It started with a whisper in the dark and the devastating hope that he might finally hear me. The whisper of the pines was the only sound that answered me. I stood at the edge of the sacred clearing, the ancient stones glinting under the sliver of a new moon. My palms were damp, my heart a frantic bird against my ribs. This was forbidden. Omegas didn't request private audiences with the Alpha. We waited. We were summoned. We endured. But the secret I carried was a live wire in my veins, burning through fear and protocol. It had been 6 weeks. 6 weeks of dizzying nausea, of a scent shift so subtle I prayed no one else noticed, of a profound, terrifying fullness that was unmistakable. The healer in me knew. The woman in love dared to hope. "You're late." The voice, deep and rough as river stone, came from the shadows between the tallest monoliths. Owen. He melted into the faint moonlight, all-imposing silhouette and restrained power. Even at a distance, his presence was a physical pressure, a pull in my very core that was equal parts devotion and dread. "I'm sorry, Alpha," I murmured, bowing my head, the submission automatic. He stepped closer, and the moonlight caught the sharp planes of his face. He was beautiful in a way that was almost violent, storm-gray eyes, a jaw set in permanent authority, dark hair that always looked windswept. The chemistry between us had never been the problem. It was a constant, humming thing, a secret language our bodies spoke whenever we were in the same room. It was everything else that was. "This is highly irregular, Bianca." He used my name like a tool, sometimes a caress, sometimes, like now, a reprimand. "The pack meeting ended hours ago. Explain." I forced my chin up, meeting his gaze. It was a struggle. An Omega holding an Alpha's stare was a challenge. But I needed him to see my eyes, to see the truth in them. It couldn't wait, and it couldn't be said where others might hear. One dark brow arched. His arms crossed over his broad chest, the simple motion making the leather of his jacket creak. "Speak, then." The words stuck in my throat, a tangled knot of joy and terror. I took a shaky breath, my hands drifting unconsciously to my still flat abdomen. "Owen, I'm with child." Silence. The kind of silence. His expression didn't change, not a flicker. The pressure in the clearing, however, shifted. The air grew heavier, charged with something that wasn't joy. "Say that again." His voice was dangerously soft. "I'm pregnant." The word hung between us, fragile and immense. The healer's signs, they're all there, and the scent, my wolf knows it, we know it. For a heartbeat, just one, I saw it. A crack in the marble. A flash of something raw and startled in his eyes. It wasn't the radiant happiness I'd foolishly daydreamed about, but it was something. Recognition. Acknowledgement. My heart leapt, a treacherous spark of hope. Then it was gone, shuttered behind a wall of ice. "How certain are you?" "Certain enough to risk your anger by coming here," I whispered. He turned away from me, running a hand through his hair. The gesture was uncharacteristically agitated. "This is inconvenient." The word was a physical blow. Inconvenient, like a misplaced report or a rained-out patrol. Not a miracle. Not a legacy. Inconvenient. The word slipped out. He pivoted back, his gaze sharp. The pack is unstable. The border skirmishes with the Shadow Claw pack are escalating. Jackson is... He cut himself off, his jaw tightening. Jackson, his beta and oldest friend, had never hidden his contempt for me, for the weakness of an Omega in the Alpha's bed. Now is not the time. This isn't a distraction. I took a step forward, desperation overriding caution. This is your heirs. I hadn't meant to reveal that part, not yet, but it tumbled out. The heartbeat, it's too fast, too layered. Owen, I think there's more than one. That stopped him cold. His eyes dropped to my stomach, and for a second, sheer, unadulterated shock dominated his features. Triplets in werewolf lineages were rare, a sign of immense potency, a blessing, a threat to some. The shock hardened into calculation. You've told no one else. Good, he nodded, more to himself than to me. You will keep it that way. You will continue your duties as pack healer. You will show no sign of weakness or change. Is that understood? The orders, delivered in that flat, alpha tone, chilled me to the bone. Where was the joy, the protection, the claim? For how long? I asked, my voice small. Until I decide how to handle this. He finally closed the distance between us, but there was no tenderness in it. He cupped my chin, his grip firm, forcing my eyes to his. The familiar scent of him, pine and cold night and pure alpha power, wrapped around me, a cruel mockery of intimacy. This changes nothing between us publicly, Bianca. You are still an Omega. I am still your Alpha. The pack's stability comes first. The spark of hope guttered and died. He saw our children as a political problem to be handled. Not a gift, not our future. And privately, I dared to ask, searching his face for any remnant of the man who had whispered promises in the dark. His thumb stroked my jaw, a gesture that once would have set me aflame. Now it felt like a brand. Privately, he said, his voice dropping to a low rumble that vibrated through me, you carry my blood. That will be addressed. In time. It was a non-answer, a dismissal. He released me and took a step back, the alpha mantle settling back onto his shoulders fully, pushing the man I loved further away. Go back to your quarters. Do not seek me out again. I will find you when necessary. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Showing weakness now would be the final nail in the coffin. I bowed my head again, the submission tasting like ash. Yes, Alpha. I turned to leave, the weight in my belly feeling like a stone. Bianca, I paused, not looking back. If you are wrong about this, the consequences for wasting my time will be severe. I didn't answer. I just walked into the dark trees, the whisper of the pines now sounding like a chorus of mourners. The walk back to the Omega quarters was a blur of shattered glass and cold numbness. I slipped inside the communal living space, hoping for the solace of my tiny private room. Bianca, goddess, you look like you've seen a ghost. Zoe, my only real friend in the pack, uncurled herself from a worn armchair by the dead fireplace. Her curly hair was a wild halo around her concerned face. An Omega like me, she had a painter's soul and a spirit too bright for our dim existence. Just tired, I mumbled, heading for the narrow hallway. Bullshit. She was in front of me in an instant, her green eyes sharp. She leaned in, sniffed the air subtly. Her eyes widened a fraction. She knew. She'd been covering for my nausea for weeks. She said nothing, just hooked her arm through mine and steered me firmly toward my room. Once the door was shut behind us, she whirled on me. You told him. It wasn't a question. I sank onto my narrow cot, the dam breaking. A single, hot tear traced a path down my cheek. He called it an inconvenience. Zoe hissed a curse that would have scandalized the elders. That cold, heartless, pompous bastard. She sat beside me, pulling me into a fierce, one-armed hug. I'm so sorry, B. He told me to hide it, to act like nothing's changed. I choked out a watery, bitter laugh. As if I could. What are you going to do? What can I do? I whispered, staring at the blank wall. He's the Alpha. We sat in silence for a long moment, the reality of my cage settling around us. A sudden, sharp bang on the door made us both jump. It wasn't a request for entry, it was an announcement. "Bianca, out now!" The voice was male, arrogant, and dripping with disdain. Jackson, my blood ran cold. Zoe's arm tightened around me. "You don't have to go," she whispered, but we both knew I did. I wiped my face, squared my shoulders, and opened the door. Jackson filled the doorway, his muscular frame radiating hostility. His blonde hair was cropped short, his blue eyes like chips of glacier ice. He looked me up and down with a sneer. "The Alpha wants you in his study. Immediately." "It's the middle of the night," Zoe said from behind me, her voice brave but thin. Jackson's gaze sliced to her. "No one asked you, Mutt." He returned his attention to me. "Now, Omega, he's not in a patient mood." This was it, so soon. My heart hammered against my ribs. Had he changed his mind? Had the reality of heirs, of triplets, broken through the cold calculus? A foolish, desperate part of me clung to the possibility as I followed Jackson's broad back through the silent, sleeping pack grounds toward the Alpha's lodge. He didn't speak another word to me. He just threw open the heavy oak door to Owen's private study and shoved me inside with a rough push between my shoulder blades. Owen stood by the large stone fireplace, a low fire casting dancing shadows. He wasn't alone. Noah, the pack's head sentinel, and the closest thing Owen had to a voice of reason, stood stiffly by the window, his kind, weathered face etched with clear discomfort. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The hope curdled in my stomach. "Close the door, Jackson," Owen said. Jackson did, leaning against it with crossed arms, a sentinel of malice. Owen finally turned. His face was a mask of cold, implacable authority. In his hand, he held a small, familiar vial, a silverwort tincture, used by healers to confirm early-stage pregnancies through a scent reaction. "You claim to be carrying my child," Owen stated. He tossed the vial to me. I fumbled but caught it, the cool glass biting into my palm. "You want me to take this? Now, in front of—" My eyes darted to Jackson's triumphant smirk. "Now," Owen commanded, his tone brooking no argument. "The tincture will react with your blood scent if your claim is true. Do it." This was a humiliation. A test of a low-ranking she-wolf's word, not the confirmation of a mate. My hands trembled as I uncorked the vial. The sharp, herbal scent filled my nostrils. I looked at Noah, pleading for some intervention. He looked down at his boots. There was no way out. I tipped the vial against my wrist. The liquid was cool. For 3 heartbeats, nothing. Then, a faint, shimmering silver glow emanated from my skin, and the scent in the room shifted unmistakably. My own scent deepened, complicated, intertwined with the undeniable, nascent signature of new life. A plurality of new life. The reaction was definitive. Noah inhaled sharply. Owen just watched, his expression unreadable. Then he gave a single, slow nod. "It seems you were telling the truth." Relief, thin and sharp, cut through me. "Owen, please." He held up a hand, silencing me. His next words were not for me. They were for the room, for the pack law. They were delivered with the finality of a judge passing a sentence. "Bianca, Omega of the Moonfall Pack, you are hereby found in breach of pack stability during a time of conflict. Your condition presents an unacceptable risk." The world began to tilt. "What?" "The father of your children," Owen continued, his gray eyes as hard and lifeless as the stones in the clearing. "Whoever he may be, has clearly used you to sow discord." And the air left my lungs in a rush. I couldn't breathe. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. For him to reveal this was a cruel joke to fool Jackson. He didn't. "Therefore," he proclaimed, his voice echoing with absolute, terrible authority. "I, Alpha Owen, cast you out. You are banished from Moonfall territory at dawn. Any claim these children have on this pack is void. You are nothing to me. You are nothing to this pack." The words hung in the air, sharper than any silver blade. Jackson's smirk returned, wider. Noah finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a pity that was worse than hatred. And Owen looked through me, as if I were already gone. As if the last 3 years, the secret nights, the life growing inside me, had been nothing but a stain to be erased. The floor fell away. The man I loved, the Alpha I had served, the father of my children, had just thrown me away. The echo of his decree, "You are banished at first light," still rang in the hollow of my skull. I stood frozen in the center of the Alpha's study, the warmth of the fire a cruel joke against the ice spreading from my core. Owen's gaze was already on a map, dismissing me. Jackson's smirk was a blade twisted in my side. Noah would not meet my eyes. A hand, small and trembling, closed around my wrist. Zoe. I hadn't even heard her approach. She must have been waiting outside. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a horror that mirrored my own, but her grip was firm. She pulled, and my body, numb and disconnected, followed. We did not speak. The walk from the Alpha's lodge to the Omega quarters was a gauntlet. Pack members lingered in the twilight, their conversations dying as we passed. Whispers slithered through the air like snakes. I kept my eyes on the worn path, Zoe's shoulder a shield against the worst of it. The life inside me, the 3 tiny sparks I had cherished, now felt like a death sentence. The Omega quarters were a long, low building, functional and bare. Our shared room was at the end. Zoe shut the door behind us, leaning against it as if barricading us from the world. The dam broke. A ragged sob tore from my throat, and I crumpled onto my narrow cot, my arms wrapping instinctively around my still flat stomach. "He denied them," I choked out, the reality shredding me anew. "He looked at the proof and he called me a liar. He's throwing us away." Zoe was at my side in an instant, her arms around me. "I know, I heard. I was by the window." Her voice was thick with tears. "Oh, Bianca, what do I do?" The question was a whisper of pure despair. "I can't survive the wilderness alone, not like this. They'll die, we'll all die." Zoe pulled back, her hands on my shoulders. Her eyes, usually so soft, were sharp with a ferocity I'd never seen. "No, listen to me. You will not die. They will not die." She stood up and began moving with a frantic energy, pulling a worn canvas pack from under her bed. "You're leaving tonight, now. But his order, Dawn. To the abyss with his order," she hissed, throwing a warm woolen tunic into the pack. "Do you think Dawn is a mercy? It's a spectacle. It gives Jackson and his sentinels time to make sure you have nothing, that your path is watched. If you go now, in the chaos of the night shift change, you have a chance." Hope, treacherous and fragile, flickered. Where would I go? The Shadow Claw borders are crawling with tension. They'd kill a Moonfall Omega on sight. "Not to Shadow Claw." Zoe knelt before me, her voice dropping. "The Whispering Woods. To the north, beyond the old hunt." A chill that had nothing to do with fear went through me. The Whispering Woods were not part of any pack's claim. They were old, deep, and shrouded in stories of lost spirits and forgotten things. Wolves who went in rarely came out. It was a place of last resort. "It's a death sentence of a different kind," I whispered. "It's a chance," she insisted, stuffing a water skin and a packet of dried meat into the pack. "There are stories, old stories my grandmother told, of places deep in the woods where the old magic still pools, where someone with healer's blood might find sanctuary." She said the last word like a prayer. "It's better than waiting for the dawn and a straight walk into a grave." She was right, I knew she was. Owen had sealed our fate with his words. Staying was death. The woods were a maybe. I placed a hand on my stomach. I have to try. Help me, I said, and the words solidified my resolve. We moved quickly. Zoe gave me her sturdiest boots and a thick cloak. I gathered my meager healer's kit, herbs, poultices, clean bandages, the only things I truly owned. My fingers brushed over the small, smooth moonstone Owen had given me during a secret tryst, a token he'd said was for my only light. I left it on the cot. A soft knock at the door made us both freeze. Zoe shoved the pack under my bed and positioned herself in front of me. "Who is it?" "Noah." The voice was low. My heart hammered against my ribs, the head sentinel. Come to enforce the decree early. Zoe looked at me, and at my nod, she opened the door a crack. Noah stood in the dim hallway, his broad frame filling the space. He did not try to enter. His eyes found me over Zoe's shoulder, and the discomfort I'd seen in the study was now a palpable grief. "Bianca," he said, his voice rough, I have no right to ask your forgiveness." He reached into his cloak and withdrew a small, heavy pouch. He extended it to Zoe, who took it warily. It clinked with the sound of metal. Silver coins. From my own chest, not pack treasury. He then produced a finely made hunting knife in a leather sheath. And this. Zoe passed them to me. The pouch was heavy. The knife's hilt fit my hand as if made for it. I stared at Noah, too many emotions warring to speak. "Why?" was all I could manage. His jaw worked. An alpha's first duty is to his pack, but a pack is not just its strength, it is its heart. He looked at the floor. What was done today, it was legally sound, but it was not right. I cannot defy him. His eyes met mine again, gleaming with wolf light in the dark. The eastern tree line near the crumbling watchstone. The sentinel on duty there is sympathetic. He will look the other way for 1 hour, beginning now. It was a thread of hope. "Thank you, Noah." He gave a sharp, pained nod. "Do not thank me, just go, and may the moon guide your path, for it has forsaken you here." With that, he melted back into the shadows of the hallway. We didn't waste another second. I shouldered the pack, the weight of the coins and knife a strange comfort. Zoe embraced me fiercely. "Find the old magic, Bianca. Keep their sparks alive." "I will," I promised, my voice stronger than I felt. Slipping out of the quarters, I became a shadow. I used every ounce of my Omega's skill at being unseen, at moving quietly. I avoided the common paths, sticking to the edges of buildings and the cover of ornamental shrubs. The pack was settling for the night, the focus inward. I could hear the low murmur from the main lodge, Owen's voice a distant rumble. He was probably already planning the next border patrol, my existence erased from his calculations. The eastern tree line was a dark wall against the starry sky. I saw the silhouette of the crumbling watchstone, a monolith from a time before our pack. A single sentinel stood there, his back to the territory, facing outward. As I watched, he deliberately turned and began walking a patrol route along the fence, away from the stone. Noah's hour had begun. I ran. The grass was cool underfoot, then the soft mulch of the forest floor swallowed my steps. I did not look back. Not at the lodge, not at the quarters, not at the life I was leaving. The trees closed around me, and with every step, the bond that tied me to the Moonfall pack. The subtle, constant awareness of my packmates, of my alpha, stretched, thinned, and with a silent, psychic snap, broke. The severance was a physical pain. I stumbled, clutching a tree trunk as a wave of nausea and dizziness washed over me. I was unmooted. Alone. For the first time in my life, there was no collective hum in the back of my mind. Just silence, and the 3 fragile, fluttering heartbeats within me. I pushed onward, driven by fear and a desperate, growing instinct. Zoe's directions were vague, based on childhood tales. North, following the river until it forks, then east where the white moss grows on the north side of the trees. The night was my ally. My wolf side, though subdued as an omega's always was, sharpened my senses. I could see in the gloom, smell the damp earth and the distant scent of prey. I heard the forest breathe around me. For hours I walked, the coin pouch a heavy reminder of my exile, the knife a cold comfort at my belt. As the first gray hint of dawn filtered through the canopy, I found the river and the fork. The white moss was there, a ghostly guide. The woods grew denser, the air colder and stiller. The familiar sounds of the hunting grounds faded, replaced by an eerie quiet. These were the true whispering woods. The trees seemed to lean in, their branches like skeletal fingers. I felt watched, but by nothing I could see or smell. Exhaustion began to cripple me. The emotional torrent, the physical flight, the severed pack bond, it was all too much. My body, busy weaving 3 new lives, demanded rest. I found a shallow cave behind a waterfall, the sound of the water masking my scent and my sounds. I ate some of the dried meat, drank from the river, and curled up in my cloak, the knife in my hand. I slept fitfully, haunted by Owen's cold eyes and Jackson's smirk. I dreamed of 3 small pups, their fur silver like moonlight, running from a shadow with Owen's face. When I woke, it was midday. The drive to move was still there. I traveled for 2 more days, deeper into the primordial heart of the woods. The world changed. The light was green and filtered. Strange, luminous fungi glowed on fallen logs. The game was scarce and wary. I felt a pressure in the air, a tingling on my skin like the buzz before a lightning strike. Old magic. It was real. On the 3rd day, as the sun was setting, I found it. A clearing unlike any other. In the center stood a ring of standing stones, much older and larger than the ones in Moonfall Clearing. They were covered in intricate, faded carvings. Wolves, moons, and symbols of healing I half recognized from ancient. In the very center of the ring grew a massive, ancient oak, its roots cradling a small, crystal-clear spring that bubbled up and formed a tiny, shimmering pool. The air here was calm. The whispering of the woods ceased. The pervasive sense of being watched lifted, replaced by a feeling of profound, waiting stillness. This was a place of power. Trembling with more than fatigue, I stepped into the stone circle. As I did, a warm, golden energy washed over me, soothing my aches, calming my frantic heart. The babies stirred within me, not in distress, but as if stretching in contentment. I fell to my knees by the pool, tears of relief finally coming. I drank from the pool. The water was sweet and alive, and a surge of vitality coursed through me. This was the place. I could feel it. I could hide here, heal here, have my babies here. Using the knife, I began to fashion a shelter from fallen branches and thick ferns against the lee of the great oak. The work was hard, but for the first time since the study, I felt a sliver of purpose. I was building a home for my children. Days bled into weeks. I lived on what I could forage, berries, nuts, edible roots, and the occasional fish from the stream that fed the pool. The spring's water seemed to nourish me impossibly well. My body changed, my pregnancy becoming visible, a small, firm swell that grew steadily. The triplets were thriving. In the deep I was lonely, but not as lonely as I had been in the pack surrounded by betrayal. The clearing felt protective. The old magic in the stones hummed a low, comforting frequency. I began to tend the clearing as a garden, using my healer's knowledge. One evening, as I sat by the pool, I felt a new, strange ripple in the magic of the place. Not threatening, but alerting. I grabbed my knife and stood, facing the tree line. A wolf stepped into the clearing, but it was like no wolf I had ever seen. It was massive, larger than any alpha, its fur a deep, shadowy gray that seemed to drink the twilight. Its eyes were not the yellow of our pack wolves, but a luminous, wise silver. It carried the weight of centuries in its gaze. It did not snarl. It did not advance. It simply looked at me, then at my stomach, and gave a slow, deliberate blink. This was no ordinary wolf. This was a guardian, a spirit of the woods. My healer's soul recognized it, a being of pure, ancient magic. It turned and disappeared back into the trees. A few minutes later, it returned, dragging the carcass of a fresh, clean-killed deer, which it laid at the edge of the stone circle. A gift, provision. Tears streamed down my face. In the world of men and alphas, I had been thrown away like garbage. Here, in the wild heart of the forgotten world, I was being seen, provided for. My value, and the value of my unborn children, was recognized by something older and wiser than any pack law. As the moon rose, painting the standing stones in silver, I made a vow, my hands resting on my growing belly. "You are wanted," I whispered to my children. "You are loved, and we will survive, not just to live, but to become strong." I looked toward the south, toward the home that had exiled me. A cold, hard certainty crystallized in my heart, sharper than Noah's knife. Owen thought he had removed a problem. He thought he had sent a helpless Omega to die. But he had sent a healer into a wellspring of old magic. He had sent the mother of his heirs into a sanctuary that was nurturing us, strengthening us. And as the ancient wolf spirit howled a song to the moon from a distant ridge, a howl that sounded like a promise, I knew with every fiber of my being, some things can never be forgiven, and one day we would return. The ancient wolf spirit's silver eyes held mine for a long moment, a silent understanding passing between us. Then, with a final, gentle nudge of its massive head against my swollen belly, it turned and melted back into the shadows of the whispering woods. I was alone again, but the profound loneliness of exile had been replaced by a fierce. The spirit's gift, a freshly caught hare, lay at my feet. It was more than food, it was a covenant. This place, this sacred clearing with its singing stones and nurturing spring, accepted me. It accepted my pups. The contrast to the cold stones of the Moonfall clearing where Owen had cast me out was so stark it stole my breath. Here, the very magic in the air seemed to hum, encouraging growth. There, the only energy had been the crushing weight of rejection. I set to work with a vigor I hadn't felt since before the banishment. Using the sharp knife Noah had given me, I skinned and prepared the hare, my movements careful but sure. The healer in me noted the richness of the meat, the vitality in it. I cooked a portion over my small fire, the smell making my stomach growl fiercely. The rest I would preserve. The triplets shifted within me, a rolling, fluttering dance, as if they too sensed the nourishment coming. As I ate, I planned. The shelter against the great oak was adequate for now, but winter would come. My pups would be born before then, tiny and vulnerable. I needed more than a lean-to. I needed walls, a door, a true den. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm of survival and creation. My body grew heavier, my center of gravity shifting almost daily, but the spring's water and the wood's bounty, guided, I was sure, by the silent guardian, kept my strength from flagging. I foraged for edible roots and late berries, always offering a silent thanks to the woods. I saw the ancient spirit sometimes at the tree line. It never approached again, but its presence was a constant, soothing balm on my severed pack bond. Using vines, fallen branches, and clay from the spring's bank, I began to build. It was slow, painstaking work. I wove branches into a lattice against the oak's broad trunk, filling the gaps with clay and moss to insulate against the coming cold. I fashioned a crude but sturdy door from woven saplings. Inside, I lined a deep nest with dried ferns and the softest It was a far cry from the Alpha's lodge, but it was mine. It was safe. One afternoon, as I was patting the final layer of clay onto the western wall, a sharp, familiar pang shot through my lower back. I froze, my hands covered in mud. It was followed by a deep, tightening cramp across the expanse of my belly. I gasped, leaning against the cool, damp clay. "Not yet," I whispered, both a plea and a command. "It's too soon." I'd been counting the moons as best I could. Werewolf pregnancies are swift, but even so, I knew I had at least a few weeks left. The triplets were making their presence known, their energy vast, but they weren't ready for the world. The cramp subsided, leaving a dull ache. False labor, perhaps, or a warning. That night, the dream came. I was back in the moonfall clearing, but it was empty and silent. The standing stones were not the warm, humming monoliths of my sanctuary, but cold, dark teeth against a starless sky. In the center stood Owen. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the Alpha's lodge, its windows blazing with light. I tried to move, to speak, but my feet were rooted to the earth. Then I felt it, a pull deep in my core, a psychic hook yanking at the place where my pack bond had been severed. It didn't come from Owen. It came from the lodge. A figure appeared in the doorway, backlit by the fire. Female, slender. Her scent carried on the dream wind, night-blooming jasmine and ambition. She lifted a hand, and the hook in my soul twisted. Pain, sharp and psychic, lanced through me. I looked down and saw my belly was flat. A cry tore from my throat, and I woke up in my moss-lined nest, drenched in sweat, my hands frantically clutching my enormous stomach. The pups kicked in frantic alarm, responding to my spike of fear. "SHHH, it's all right," I panted, tears streaming down my face. But the dream clung to me. It wasn't just a nightmare. It felt like a sending, a warning. The pull had felt so real, the emptiness it promised so absolute. Someone in Moonfall was using magic, dark, pulling magic, and it was seeking what was mine. The incident forced my plans to accelerate. I could not just be a mother in hiding. I had to be a protector, a warrior. My children and I were targets, not just of neglect, but of something more sinister. The next morning, I began my first conscious attempt to touch the old magic of the clearing. I sat by the spring, placed my hands in the cool, shimmering water, and closed my eyes. Instead of reaching for the broken thread of the pack link, I reached down into the earth below me and out into the ancient silence of the stones. I asked for nothing. I simply listened. At first, there was only the sound of the woods. Then, a vibration, deep and low, thrummed up through the ground into my bones. The water around my fingers grew warmer. Images, not visions but knowings, seeped into my mind. I saw roots drinking deep from hidden aquifers. I saw the stones marking ley lines of power that crisscrossed the continent. I saw the ancient spirit, not as a single wolf, but as a consciousness woven from the lives of every creature that had ever sought refuge here. The magic didn't speak in words. It spoke in essence. It offered connection, not domination. Strength, not force. It was the opposite of alpha power, which commanded and took. This nurtured. I opened my eyes. The world looked the same, but it felt fundamentally different. I was not just living in the clearing. I was beginning to commune with it. The constant, low-grade anxiety that had been my companion since my exile softened at the edges. This place would help me. I had to learn how to let it. My physical training began that same day. I could not run or fight, not in my condition. But I could breathe. I could move with intention. I practiced the slow, deliberate forms I'd seen the pack warriors use in meditation, adapting them for my heavy, unbalanced body. I focused on my core, on the well of strength that held my pups. I imagined drawing energy from the earth with every inhale and pushing out fear with every exhale. Days blurred into a cycle of physical labor, meditation, and preparation. I crafted a sling from hare hide to carry my babies when they came. I stocked a cache of dried meat, medicinal herbs, and clean moss. The sanctuary provided, and I worked until the turning point came on a night of the full moon. The moon's pull was a physical ache in my blood, a remnant of my werewolf nature. In the pack, it would be a night of running, of howling, of communal power. Here, it was a solitary, piercing song. I stood in the center of the stone circle, my face tilted to the silver light. My belly was a vast, taut moon of its own. The longing to shift, to feel my wolf form, was a sharp pain. But I knew I couldn't. The strain might hurt the pups. So I did the only thing I could. I howled. It started as a low, mournful note, a cry of loss for my pack, my home, my mate. But as it rose from my human throat, it changed. It was woven with the vibration of the stones, amplified by the magic in the air. It became a declaration, not of an omega, not of a cast-off. It was the howl of a mother, of a guardian, of a woman who was claiming her own territory. The sound echoed through the clearing, powerful and pure. From the depths of the woods, an answering howl rose. The voice of the ancient spirit, deep and resonant, twining with mine. Then another and another, the voices of the ordinary wolves who lived in the whispering woods. They were not my pack. But in that moment, under that moon, they were my chorus. As the last note faded, something solidified within me. A new bond. Not the subservient, fragile thread of an omega to her alpha, but a deep, root sandstone connection to the land itself. I felt the clearing's boundaries as if they were an extension of my skin. I felt the life within it, the sleeping birds, the burrowing voles, the watchful spirit. This was my anchor. I was no longer. The final weeks of my pregnancy were a time of inward focus. The pups were so large now, their movements strong and constant. I talked to them. I told them stories of the stars, of the trees, of a mother's love that no alpha's decree could break. I did not tell them of Owen. He was a ghost, irrelevant to our world. Then, on a crisp morning when the first frost glittered on the moss, my waters broke. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, a tidal wave of pressure that dropped me to my knees by the spring. This was no false alarm. It was time. Fear, cold and slick, tried to surface. I was alone. I was a healer, but I had never delivered a baby, let alone 3. What if something went wrong? But as another contraction seized me, the fear was burned away by a blinding, primal determination. I crawled to my den, to the soft nest I had prepared. The labor was a storm that lasted through the day and into the night. The world narrowed to the cycle of agony and brief, trembling respite. I bit down on a strip of leather, my screams muffled by my sanctuary. I chanted prayers to the moon, to the spirit, to the magic of the stones. I drew on the earth's steady strength until I felt my consciousness fraying at the edges. Just as I thought I could bear no more, as the dawn began to tinge the sky with pale rose, the first pup was born. A tiny, squirming boy, slick with birth, his cry a fierce, indignant wail that was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I cleaned him with trembling hands, weeping, and laid him against my chest. His scent was milk and new life and something uniquely, powerfully his. The second, a girl, followed quickly, her entrance into the world slightly easier. She was quieter, her eyes squinted shut, her tiny fingers curling around my thumb. Then, after a final, monumental effort that tore a raw shout from my throat, the third. Another boy, smaller than his. Exhaustion hit me like a physical blow. I lay back in the nest, my 3 newborns nestled on my chest, their mewling sounds and warm weight a reality more profound than any dream. They were here. They were perfect. They were mine. I must have slept because the sun was high when I woke. The pups were stirring, seeking nourishment. As I fed them, I examined each tiny face, searching for any trace of him. I saw my own dark hair on 2 of them. I saw a familiar curve to an eyebrow on the smallest boy. But mostly I saw them. Their own souls, already bright in their eyes. I named them then, as the sunlight dappled through the oak leaves. The firstborn, my fierce boy, I called Kale, meaning strength. The quiet, observant girl I named Luna, for the moon that had witnessed her mother's vow. The smallest, his grip surprisingly strong on my finger, I named Reese, meaning You are not heirs of Moonfall, I whispered to them, my voice hoarse but steady. You are children of the Whispering Woods. Your legacy is resilience. Your birthright is this sanctuary. For 3 days, I lived in a blissful, tired bubble of new motherhood. The ancient spirit left a freshly killed deer at the edge of the clearing, and the spring's water seemed richer, helping my milk come in. I was healing, my body sore but thrumming with a fierce, protective love. On the 4th day, as I was washing cloths in the spring, the new bond I had forged with the land gave a sudden, violent twang. It was an alarm, a violation. I straightened, my senses flaring. The pups, wrapped and sleeping in a moss-lined hollow nearby, were oblivious. I grabbed my knife, my heart hammering against my ribs. I reached out with my newfound awareness, feeling there at the southern edge of the clearing where the tree line was thickest. A presence, not the spirit, not an animal. Human, werewolf. The scent, carried on a shifting breeze, reached me a second later. It was musky, aggressive, tinged with pine and aggression. It was not a moonfall scent. It was shadow claw, and they were not just passing through. The magic of the clearing shivered with the tension of a predator circling, testing the boundaries. My boundaries. My sanctuary had been found. The scent was a violation. Musky, aggressive, laced with pine and a sharp, unfamiliar male spice. Shadow claw. The alarm thrumming through the roots beneath my palms confirmed it. An intruder, circling the boundary of my clearing. I pulled my hands from the earth, the connection snapping with a silent, resonant ping. In the den, Kale, Luna, and Reese slept in a pile of soft moss and dried ferns, their tiny chests rising and falling, blissfully unaware. The protective fury that rose in me was a physical heat, a silent snarl that bared my teeth. No, this was not a threat I could hide from or outwait. This was a claim being tested. Moving silently, I retrieved the bone-handled knife Noah had given me. Its weight was a cold comfort. I then took up my true weapon, a long, sturdy staff of heartwood, hardened in fire and tipped with a vicious point of flint I'd napped myself. It was a healer's hands that had made it, but a mother's heart that shaped it into a spear. I slipped from the den, pausing only to lay a whispered ward upon the entrance, a plea to the ancient stones to shroud my children. Then, I melted into the tree line. Tracking him was simple. His scent was a clumsy stain on the clean, damp breath of the woods. He was trying to be stealthy, but his presence was a shout against the Whispering Woods' subtle song. I found him on the eastern edge, where the guardian stones were thick with moss. A large, brutish wolf with a ragged charcoal coat, his nose to the ground, sniffing at the very edge of my warded boundary. Testing its strength, he hadn't crossed, not yet, but his intent coiled in the air like a poison vine. I stepped from the shadows, planting my spear staff firmly on the ground between us. You are trespassing. He started, shifting in an instant. One moment a wolf, the next a naked, burly man with a scar bisecting his eyebrow. His eyes, a muddy brown, swept over me with dismissive curiosity, lingering on the obvious evidence of my recent birth. A cruel smirk touched his lips. Well, the rumors are true. Moonfall's cast off Omega, playing Den Mother in the haunted wood. Your name means nothing here, I said, my voice steady, channeling the stillness of the stones at my back. This is claimed territory. Leave. He barked a laugh. Claimed by you, a lone, weakened female. I smell your pups on you. You're in no state to hold a border. He took a deliberate step forward, the sole of his foot hovering over the invisible line. My alpha is curious. He heard Moonfall's Alpha threw away something valuable. Maybe we'll find a use for you. Or for the pups. Strong blood if the sire was really Owen. His words were meant to terrorize, to provoke. Once they would have. Now they only crystallized my resolve. He saw a vulnerable Omega. He did not see the roots that fed me, the stones that answered my touch, the ancient spirit that watched from the deep woods. He did not see the healer, who knew every vulnerable point on a body. "Take another step," I said softly, "and you will learn the difference between weakness and choice." Sneering, he stepped across the boundary. The woods reacted. A low groan vibrated through the earth. The moss on the stones seemed to darken. Rourke felt it too, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, but his arrogance overruled it. He lunged for me, shifting mid-leap, jaws aimed. I didn't try to match his strength. I used his momentum. Sidestepping, I brought the flint point of my spear down in a sharp, precise arc, not to kill, but to cripple. It sank deep into the muscle of his hind leg as he passed. He yelped, a shockingly pained sound, and tumbled, scrabbling on the damp leaves. He was up in a second, furious, limping. Blood matted his dark fur. "You bitch!" He charged again, more carefully. I parried snapping jaws with my staff, the impact shuddering up my arms. I was tiring faster than I'd hoped. My body was still healing. I couldn't win a battle of attrition. I needed to end it. I feigned a stumble, letting my guard drop for a heartbeat. He took the bait, surging forward. As his weight came at me, I dropped completely, rolling beneath him, and with all the force I could muster, I drove my knife upward into the soft junction of his front leg and chest. A guttural cry. He collapsed, shifting back to human form, clutching the bleeding wound. His eyes were wide with pain and shock. I stood over him, breathing hard, my spear point aimed at his heart. You're not just an Omega," he gasped. "I am the heart of this wood," I said, the words flowing through me like truth. "I am its healer and its wrath. Carry this message to your Alpha. The whispering woods are under my protection. The next intruder will not leave breathing." I pulled my knife free. He cried out, "The wound is clean, you'll live, if you go now and never return." He stared at me, the arrogance finally shattered, replaced by a primal fear. He saw it now, the quiet power in the clearing, the way the shadows seemed to lean in, watching. He scrambled back, clutching his injuries, and without another word, shifted into his wounded wolf form and fled, his gait uneven, into the depths of the forest. I stood there until his scent faded entirely, the adrenaline leaching away, leaving me trembling. I sank to my knees, pressing my hands to the earth. "Thank you," I poured into the soil, into the roots. A warm, reassuring pulse echoed back. The boundary held. It had held with me, but the victory was cold. Rourke was a scout. Where one came, others would follow. Shadowclaw knew my location now, and his words echoed, if the sire was really Owen. Moonfall's poison had spread. My children would never be safe as long as the world saw them as a political tool. A claim, a weakness. I returned to the den. The pups were awake, mewling softly. I gathered them close, their warm, milky scent washing over me, cleansing the stench of blood and fear. As I nursed them, a resolution, hard and clear as quartz, formed in my core. I could not live on the edge of a knife, waiting for the next threat. I had to secure our future, not just hide it. I had to make the world see what I saw, a sovereign territory, not a hiding place. A legacy, not a secret. The dream sending of the mysterious female, the dark magic that had tried to steal my pup's vitality, came back to me. That threat was still coiled within Moonfall. Perhaps it was time to turn from prey to messenger. The plan took shape over the following days as I healed and tended to my growing, bright-eyed children. I would not go to war. I was one she-wolf with 3 newborns, but I could stage a revelation. A statement. The next full moon was the key. On the night of the full moon, the magic of my clearing was at its peak. The spring water glowed, the carvings on the stones seemed to move, and the connection I felt to the land was a living cord of silver light in my chest. I prepared. I washed in the sacred spring, braided my hair with strands of wolf lichen, and dressed in the simple, sturdy dress I'd made. Now adorned with symbols of the woods stitched in thread I'd dyed with berries and roots. As the moon climbed to its zenith, I stood in the center of the stone circle, each pup nestled in a sling against my chest, warm and sleeping. I raised my face and howled. It was not the howl of an omega. It was not the howl of a moonfall wolf. It was the voice of the clearing itself, a complex, layered song of root and rock, of flowing water and ancient guardianship. It sang of new life and fierce protection. It was a claim, broadcast on the oldest frequency of our kind. From the deep woods, the answering howl of the ancient spirit rose, a deep, resonant bass note that shook the leaves. Then another and another. The wolves of the whispering woods, my unofficial pack, added their voices to the chorus. The sound was a tangible wave, rolling out from our sanctuary across territories, a sonic banner unfurling. Hear us. We are here. I knew it would be heard. In moonfall, in shadow claw, by every sensitive wolf for miles. Let them hear. Let them wonder. The response came not with howls, but with silence from the direction of moonfall. A heavy, listening silence. Then, 3 days later, the forest brought me a new scent on the wind. Not shadow claw, moonfall. A single wolf approaching with caution. Not from the direction of the pack grounds, but from a little-used path. The scent was familiar, clean, like frost, and he stopped at the exact edge of the boundary, respecting it. He stood in human form, his hands open at his sides, his face etched with a deep, weary tension. He looked older. I stepped out from the trees, my pups in their slings, my spear staff in my hand. We regarded each other across the invisible line. "Bianca," he said, his voice low, "I heard your howl." I said nothing. He swallowed, his eyes dropping to the 3 small faces peeking from the fabric against my chest. A profound sadness crossed his features. "They're real." "They are," I said. "Their names are Kale, Luna, and Reese." He flinched at the names, at their undeniable reality. "The pack, there is unrest. The howl, it was felt. It's all anyone can talk about. They say the haunted woods have a new spirit, a mother spirit." I remained silent, letting the power of the clearing hum around us. "Owen," Noah began, then stopped, shaking his head. "He is entrenched. The female from your vision, it's Alara, a rising warrior from a strong bloodline. She has been at his side since your banishment. She advocates for harsher measures against Shadow Claw, for total consolidation of power. So she had a name. Alara, the one who had tried to harm my children with her dark pulling magic. The knowledge settled in me, not as fear, but as a filed piece of intelligence. "Why are you here, Noah?" "To see," he said simply, his gaze honest. "To know what I helped send into the world, and to warn you. Shadow Claw is mobilizing. They see your territory as a vulnerable point between our lands. They will try to take it. They have already tried. They failed." He looked at me then, truly looked. At the sharp point of my spear, at the calm certainty in my eyes, at the thriving children at my breast, at the ancient, watchful stones behind me. He saw the Omega was gone. In her place stood something he didn't have a name for. "I believe you," he whispered, awe in his voice. He reached into a pouch at his belt and drew out a small, wrapped bundle. He placed it carefully on a stump just on his side of the boundary. "Salt, medicine, things you might need. Not as penance. There is no penance for what was done, but as an offering between territories." I gave a single, slow nod, a diplomatic acceptance. "Will you return?" he asked, the question hanging in the air. I looked down at my children. At Kale's strong brow, at Luna's moon-pale hair, at Reese's fiery spirit even in sleep. I looked at the great oak, the sacred spring, the guardian stones. I felt the deep, singing bond in my soul. "I am home," I said, and the words were the truest I had ever spoken. There is nothing for me in Moonfall, no forgiveness to be given, no past to reclaim. Owen is a ghost in a story I no longer tell. My allegiance is here, to this land and to them. Noah bowed his head, a gesture of respect from a head sentinel to a sovereign power. Then I will carry that truth back with me. It will change things. "See that it does," I said. He turned to leave, then paused. "The howl, it was beautiful, Bianca. It sounded like a beginning." He left then, fading into the trees. I retrieved his offering. It was as he said, useful and given with respect. I stood for a long time, watching the dappled sunlight. The chapter of Bianca the Omega, the betrayed, the banished, was closed. The psychic pull from Moonfall was severed, not by them, but by me. The threat from Shadow Claw remained, but they would find not a victim, but a guardian woven into the very fabric of a powerful place. The threat from Alara lingered in the shadows, but she was now known, and I was forewarned. My children stirred, waking for their feeding. I sat on a sun-warmed stone, and as I nursed them, I whispered their legacy into their tiny, listening ears. "You are not of Moonfall. You are of the Whispering Woods. Your strength is the strength of the deep root. Your courage is the courage of the standing stone. Your magic is the old magic, the true magic. You are loved and you are free." The ancient wolf spirit emerged from the trees and lay down at the edge of the clearing, a massive, silver-eyed sentinel under the sun. My pups, my treasures, my triplets, drank contentedly. The forest breathed around us. Some things can never be forgiven, but some things, like a new world built from stone and spirit and a mother's unforgetting love, can never be taken away. Our story was no longer about being thrown away. It was about what we had built, right here from the ashes, and it was only just beginning.